425-877-973-7425. I suppose I should get open the call screening program. I should, shouldn't I? So that I can see your calls flow through. Real quick, housekeeping note. I want to keep this up. There is in USA Today, they've got a list of best beer gardens in America. I realize it's in the morning, but still. And one in Georgia has been nominated, Tucker Brewing up in Tucker, Georgia. The rest, they're in California, Virginia. There's one in Texas, I think, a lot up in New England. We should support the Georgia one because they're awesome. So if you text the word data to 33777, I'll send you back a link. You click the link and you'll see a vote button and you can vote it. Now, I must talk about a story that should not even be a story. It really shouldn't be a story, but it is. The stage at CPAC. This penetrated the mainstream media. The media spends a lot of time these days talking about, for example, QAnon, conservative conspiracy theories. There's never been an accounting for the media conspiracy theories. Neera Tanden, Joe Biden's nominee for Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has been withdrawn. I think she stepped aside. She knows she's not going to get confirmed. She peddled a conspiracy theory that Anthony Kennedy had been bribed, and that's why he stepped down. So that Kavanaugh could be on the bench. She pushed that theory. No one in the media called her out. Much of the media has been obsessed with the conspiracy theory that the Russians stole the election for Donald Trump. It is absolutely 100% true that the Russians intended to disrupt the election and intended to sow discord. It absolutely is true. But the media advanced beyond the truth, just like all conspiracy theorists do, to concoct a strange story that included Michael Cohen making surreptitious trips to Prague to meet with Russian agents. That has never been retracted by McClatchy, which has defended the story. The media wants to highlight all of the crazy conspiracy theories people on the right have, but by and large, they buy into the conspiracy theories on the left. They buy into them, they embrace them, they report them as truth. And one of those was about CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. According to mainstream media outlets, though it started as a fringe left-wing thing, the stage at CPAC resembled a Nazi insignia. The stage resembled the Othala rune. The foreword wrote this. The SS Race and Settlement Office included genetic scientists who were in charge of making sure SS officers and their wives remained pure, as well as reassigning formerly Jewish-owned land to the Nazis. It was the office in charge of the heart of the Nazis' racist philosophy, studying the supposedly superior Aryan traits and trying to reproduce them in order to Germanicize sufficiently white Poles and Ukrainians by overseeing their marriages. There was a comparison to the CPAC stage. Now, you had to see it from above. Of course, Hyatt, where the organization held its conference, rushed out to apologize. It was picked up in the media. You know, my wife heard the story. I don't know that conservatives pay enough attention to what Apple News pushes out with you. Apple uses human curators for its news app. My wife had seen the story about CPAC stage and that it was a Nazi symbol. A lot of people on the left saw it. It got picked up by people in the mainstream media. It was a conspiracy theory. It has always been a conspiracy theory, and yet it was treated legitimately by people on the left, by people in the media who are of the left. Now the Forward, a Jewish publication, has come up with this having covered the controversy and the denials from CPAC, the company that was hired to set up the stage at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando, Florida last weekend has taken full responsibility for the design of the stage that resembled a Nazi insignia. In an exclusive statement to the Forward on Tuesday evening, Design Foundry, a stage design firm based in Hyattsville, Maryland, said it, quote, had no idea that the design resembled any symbol, nor was there any intention to create something that did, end quote. The organizers of CPAC have announced they will not use the firm for future events. Images of the CPAC main stage, which featured Donald Trump's first post-presidential speech on Sunday, went viral online as observers noted its resemblance to the Oldul or Othalo rune, a symbol emblazoned on Nazi uniforms. After the conclusion of the event, Hyatt Hotels released a statement saying it had addressed the concerns with the conference organizers and denounced the use of symbols as abhorrent. Design Foundry said the American Conservative Union approved the stage design, which was intended to provide the best use of space given the constraints of the ballroom and social distancing requirements. According to the terms of the contract signed with Design Foundry and shared with the Forward, the ACU approved the design but had no rights to change the design or dismantle the stage. The designs, renderings, drawings, specifications, materials, and other documents used or created as part of the proposal are owned by Design Foundry. The contract reads, Design Foundry has worked with CPAC for several years and has provided services to MSNBC, Google, Citibank, Target, and Joe Biden. But left-wing zealots on social media were able to generate a conspiracy theory no different than the QAnon conspiracy theories, but more damaging to a degree in that it got into the mainstream media as proof that CPAC was some sort of white supremacist gathering. In fact, CPAC found out certain white supremacists were trying to come and blocked them from being able to get in the building. But it just should remind you how easily left-wing conspiracy theories get picked up by the media and treated as mainstream. Which leads me to H.R. 1. The House of Representatives is considering House Resolution 1. For those of you who do not know, House Resolution 1 is always has been, at least for the last 40 years, has always been a messaging piece of legislation. House Resolution 1 never gets passed. It doesn't get passed by Republicans. It doesn't get passed by Democrats. House Resolution 1 doesn't get passed. I've gotten multiple calls from people whipped into a frenzy over what's in it, lowering the voting age to 16, nationalizing the elections, requiring every state to go to mail-in ballots, legalizing ballot harvesting where people can show up at your door and collect your ballot, all the Democratic wish list. It's not going to pass. It can't pass the Senate. It'll pass the House, I'm sure. They'll force it through, potentially, but even then they've only got 5 votes. I don't know that it will pass. It won't pass the Senate because the filibuster is there, and several Democrats in the Senate have come out and spoken against it. It's got people whipped into a frenzy on the left and the right, though. Here is crooked.com, a left-wing site. The headline says it all. Democrats must prepare for democracy's last stand. The Republican Party faces a fundamental problem. They are dependent on low voter turnout to win. Their policies and politics are increasingly unpopular with the majority of voters. Not true. Forcing them to either broaden their appeals, which they are, or relying on low vote turnout in order to win. That is an issue. And they have chosen the latter. It's a fact of modern American politics acknowledged by former President Trump, state GOP officials, and any number of Republicans in Washington, talking amongst themselves in committee rooms and on conference calls when they think Democrats can't hear them. On December 6th, Senator Ted Cruz spoke on the Senate floor in defense of his objection to certifying the results of the 2020 presidential election. Recent polling shows that 39% of Americans believe the election just occurred was rigged. It is the responsibility, I believe, of this office to acknowledge that as a profound threat to the country and to the legitimacy of any administration that will come in the future. And on it goes. And now they claim that the Republicans are doing everything they can working hand in glove with the Supreme Court to suppress the vote. Voter suppression is a left-wing mythology like the CPAC stage it's been embraced by the media. I mean, the media loves these stories. The media, look at Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams refused to concede in 2018. They still treat her as if she won the gubernatorial race in Georgia, and no one questions her. She's allowed to do it. She checks all the intersectional boxes to be able to claim she won the race, and the media can't fact check her because they would be racist if they did. Meanwhile, they went out of their way to blast Donald Trump for just wanting all the votes counted. There is a double standard. You got to acknowledge a double standard. And the left-wing conspiracy theories of voter suppression. Listen, they're targeting Georgia now. Georgia is a focus of this. Democratic voters in Georgia cast nearly twice as many mail-in ballots as Republicans, and in response, the Republican state legislature has introduced numerous bills that would impose onerous ID requirements and restrict absentee voting and voter registration. And like Cruz, Georgia Senate Republicans now claim they do this in response to the calls of millions of Georgians who've raised deep and heartfelt concerns about the November 2020 election. Now, consider this. The Democrats say it's voter suppression. More than 400,000 Republicans, 700,000 total people, more than 400,000 Republicans said they wouldn't go vote in the runoff in January because they didn't believe in the integrity of the process. They thought it would be stolen from them. When Democrats did not turn out in Georgia in 2018, the Democrats said all of those storylines about Republicans potentially blocking people from voting and making it difficult to vote was part of the effort to suppress the vote. It wasn't what the Republicans did, it was how Republicans talked that suppressed the vote. If they're opposed to voter suppression, shouldn't they want to restore integrity to the election so that 400,000, 700 total thousand people will show up and vote in a runoff? You know, in Georgia, 75% of the Republicans who voted and more than 75% of the Republicans who did not vote in the runoff believed that it was going to be stolen. The belief that the election was going to be easily stolen caused more than 400,000 Republicans to stay home. If the Democrats are really worried about voter suppression, shouldn't they want to do whatever they can to encourage those people? Or is it just the Democrats they care about? Is it just the Democrats they care about? I thought that they wanted everyone to vote. If you want everyone to vote, you've got to acknowledge that there are questions whether you think they're ill-founded or not. But also you need to understand that it does make it easy to rig the system. If you have a ballot drop box that's nowhere secure, nowhere near the Board of Elections, nowhere near security cameras, out in a mall parking lot, as some of them were, how easy is it just to pour water down there and ruin the ballots? How easy is it to overwhelm the system? And also, they should note, and they don't want to note, that some of the measures in this House legislation are bipartisan, including curtailing the number of days in which you can request an absentee ballot. The cutoff will now be 11 days before the election. Right now, it's the Saturday before the election. That's got bipartisan support. They don't want to note that. But more importantly, they want to focus on H.R. 1. That the Democrats have to pass H.R. 1 because of a lot of things in the Georgia legislature that aren't going to pass. They keep highlighting these measures in the Georgia Senate. If I came on this program and spent an hour railing on all the fringy wackadoo things in the Georgia legislature the Democrats wanted to pass, you would say, well, they're never going to pass them. Exactly. And many of the things that the Republicans are looking at, some of the legislation that was dropped, it's not going to pass. The Speaker of the House has already said curtailing who can vote by absentee ballot is already dead on arrival in the House. It's not going to happen. But they're making a big deal out of it. Why? Because the Democrats have conspiracy theories on their own side. They don't like to be held accountable for those theories. The media likes to treat those theories legitimately while being dismissive of the right. The CPAC Nazi symbol stage that wasn't real became a mainstream media story, so much so that my wife saw it on Apple News. So too are the voter suppression stories by the left. It is left-wing mythology, but the media treats it as real. The same media that dismisses QAnon as a conspiracy theory treats all of this stuff as real when it's not true. Is it any wonder so many people don't believe the media anymore? You can't believe your lying eyes.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Why, hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Chris Hemsworth, you know, Thor. Chris Hemsworth is in trouble. He's getting savage. Naturally, it's on social media. It is the savagery of social media. He was at a party for a friend, like a birthday party for a friend. It was an 80s themed party. He didn't wear a mask. Thor, son of Odin, did not wear a mask. And he's getting attacked for not wearing a mask. Now, here's the thing you have to know. In Sydney, Australia, where he is, they don't have any COVID cases. They've opened back up in Australia. There are hardly any cases of the coronavirus. They've largely opened, and in his areas, I think there were 15 total cases in the last month in Sydney, and none the week of the party he was at. And so all the people who are mad at him are people who aren't in Australia. But it became a national story in the United States because there was no appreciation for the fact that we live on a planet of 7 to 8 billion people. Not all of us live in the same country, and not all of us have the same COVID conditions. Good gracious. The one of the things that I find most discrediting about the media, beyond the conspiracy theories, is their willingness to trump up these Twitter-generated outrage stories. It's outrage on Twitter, therefore we got to run a story. And they're all anonymous accounts. So the media does a hit job on Chris Hemsworth based on anonymous Twitter accounts who don't realize the conditions in Australia where he is. Speaking of Australia, we have two heroes in Australia. Two men got on an inflatable mattress off the coast of Western Australia with a large number of beers and floated away. Jackson Perry and Noah Palmer were floating outside Palmer's Oceanside house in Mandurah, just south of Perth, Australia, with an esky, that's a cooler, full of beers, when they noticed they were drifting even further from the shore. The two friends originally intended to hover about 50 meters from land, but soon found the wind was pushing them several hundred and then several thousand meters out. We couldn't paddle against the wind, and we were just going further and further out, Perry told Sunrise. We only aimed to be 100 meters offshore max, and before we knew it, we were out to sea. All we knew is that our friend Tex was 30 to 40 minutes away, and we were just hoping he finds us before all our phones were dying, and we were kind of getting worried at that point. Making matters worse was the fact the mattress was full of holes and gradually sinking, forcing Palmer to jump off every 10 minutes and reinflate it manually. Volunteer rescuers eventually received their call for help. Tex was the first to respond, arriving on a jet ski with another friend, Ruben, to rescue the strandees. After spending some 3 hours adrift, Perry and Palmer were ultimately returned safely to land. Asked if they'd do it differently next time, they expressed almost zero regret. Definitely checked the wind forecast before anything, but other than that, we had a pretty good time. Yes, an air mattress floating out to sea with a cooler full of beers. It sounds like a day to me. Heroes we need in Australia.
30.
You know, the Australians. They're like Americans, but almost more fun. In fact, a friend of mine who is from Great Britain calls them the Americans of the Commonwealth. I can see why. And how is it awesome that you got Jackson and Noah and Tex. And Tex comes to the rescue with a jet ski. Yes, indeed. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well, I gotta spend a few moments here. I should have thought of getting my buddy Dave Briggs on to talk about this. I didn't think about it at the time. Jemele Hill, you know Jemele Hill. Jemele Hill was the ESPN Sports Center anchor who politicized everything. So much so that she was able to drive down the ratings of Sports Center worse than Keith Olbermann ever did. And then the cokehead president of ESPN left, and they shook things up at ESPN, if I get the timeline right, and she was out. Well, she's got a piece. She's moved over to the Atlantic, and this is a woman who finds racism in everything. The night that sports began shutting down was the night that the United States began shutting down. On March 11, 2020, an announcer at the Oklahoma City Thunder's home arena told fans just before tip-off that the evening's game had been postponed. Within an hour, the visiting Utah Jazz revealed that a player soon identified as Rudy Gobert had tested positive for COVID-19, and the NBA also declared it was indefinitely suspending the season. Suddenly, Americans were forced to accept the coronavirus pandemic was going to completely disrupt everyday life. Although the NBA eventually resumed its season by creating a playoff bubble, and other professional and college leagues figured out a way to return in some form, the sports world is still struggling for normalcy. Nearly a year after widespread shutdowns began and fans turned their attention to matters of life and death. As the pandemic dragged on, the leagues, universities, pro franchises, and other entities that profit from a multi-billion-dollar sports economy made a push for games to return. But these efforts also reflected a working assumption that the mere presence of sports would provide comfort and perhaps a welcome distraction for people who wanted to escape the horrors of the pandemic, at least momentarily. But the ratings for some of the biggest sporting events in the past year show that the public's emotional connection to sports during a tumultuous time has been grossly overestimated. In practically every sport, the number of television viewers nosedived in 2020, despite the fact that more people than usual were stuck at home. Compared with the previous year, ratings were down 51% for the NBA Finals, 61% for the NHL Finals, 45% for the tennis's U.S. Open. Not even the Kentucky Derby was safe. Ratings dropped 49% from the previous year. The 8.3 million viewers represented the Derby's lowest TV audience ever. The NFL has long been immune to ratings pressure, but not this year. The NFL couldn't have asked for a better storyline for the Super Bowl earlier this month. The game pitted Tom Brady, the celebrated Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, seeking his 7th Super Bowl win at age 43 against Patrick Mahomes, the brilliant young Kansas City Chiefs star who's become the new face of pro football. The game should have been a ratings bonanza. Instead, the Super Bowl drew its lowest ratings in 15 years. Now, Nope. Don't see it. Nope. Don't. No. None of it's here. None of it's here. None of the. There's no acknowledgement of the reality of what's going on. First, let's be honest here. Jemele Hill can't honestly reflect or engage with what's happening because she's part of the problem. Part of it is the lack of fans. The lack of fans in the stands, the lack of authenticity has had a problem. And she does hint at that in fairness. But here's the thing. She gets it and misses it at the same time. Let me read you the sentence. The overriding lesson from the past year is that too much money was at stake for pro and college sports not to forge ahead, no matter how awkward, hypocritical, and exploitative the attempt might be. Do you remember the woman, she was a USA Today sports columnist, who is totally member of Woko Haram. She's all about wokeness in sports, and she praised the Pac-10, the Big Ten and the Pac. She praised them for not playing. And then when the Big Ten announced that they were going to play, she condemned them. How dare you give in to the peer pressure? How dare you play football? I mean, she wanted to shame the players. This was a USA Today sports columnist who was essentially upset she had to work. She had spent her time when they weren't playing ranting and railing about politics, and now she had to actually do her damn job, and she was upset about it because football might come back. Jemele Hill helped poison and politicize sports. And that's just the thing here. She can't understand, she can't process, she can't relate. Yes, a lot of the reason sports was down in the ratings is because they changed up the rules. They shortened seasons. A lot of people didn't think it was fair. There was frustration. Look at college football, where you had a large group of teams that set out half the season and then came in charged and ready to go when the other players had already been out there for the entire season, giving it their all. Of course, it wasn't fair. People knew it. You were barely allowed in stands in some games. I'm sorry. Baseball is not the same if you can't sit in the stands and have a beer and watch the game. Watching baseball on television is definitionally boring. It is watching grass grow. And I still do it. But it's in the background. It's noise in the background. It's like watching golf. I watch golf in the background as I'm watching the games because, I mean, I'm interested in some of the... I will be really freaking interested if Tiger Woods has a comeback. I will watch every golf game that has Tiger Woods, but it'll be on in the background unless Tiger is about to hit the ball. When Tiger's going to tee off, my eyes will be fixated. And a few of the others as well. Some of them I know. I'll be engaged in watching. When they go back to the Masters, I want to go back to the Masters. A buddy of mine who's listening right now, we're going to go to the Masters together. I've never been to the Masters. I want to go. I want in-person sporting events. The inauthenticity of the fake crowd noise is really actually disconcerting when the cameras are on the field and then suddenly there's an accidental camera shot and the stadium is empty and you're like, who's making the noise? But there's another issue here too, and Jemele Hill is part of this problem, and so she can't even recognize it to relate to it. People wanted to use sports to escape. To this day, sports is escapism. And yet no one could escape. You couldn't watch a game and escape the virus. You couldn't watch the game and escape Boko Haram burning down America with Antifa and BLM. You couldn't escape any of that. You couldn't escape the taking a knee. Notice how they work like hell to make sure they never talk about how taking a knee began to politicize sports and corresponded with numbers dropping off. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about Boko Haram in sports, the never-ending lectures from millionaires and billionaires about white privilege. They don't want to talk about the millionaires and billionaires screaming about social justice here while turning a blind eye to China. Say, I don't have a position on that. LeBron James comes out and says he's educated and knows the issues and talks about everything and he's not afraid. What about China? I got no opinion on China. The American public kind of gets it. The number of ads during the Super Bowl that were lecturing and preening and in your face. Bruce Springsteen, a man who can't stand conservatives and has for years disparaged them, going to a church to claim we need the middle, only to have Jeep cancel him for a DUI that's now apparently been retracted. So now they're bringing him back. He's going to lecture, Bruce Springsteen is going to lecture us about the middle when he's on the far left. I don't blame people for tuning out. Sports is not an escape. To the extent you want to go to the stands and have a tailgate party, you're not going to watch TV anyway, by and large. But at home, you're going to sports because you want an escape. And you know what? Streaming services are up. The number of people watching streaming services skyrocketed. The number of people who watched ESPN's documentary series on Michael Jordan, massive. They couldn't translate it into people watching basketball games, though, because people are tired of getting lectured by billionaires on the basketball court. They're tired of the rules changes. They're tired of the baseball commissioner continually screwing up the game to make it even more insufferable. They're tired of the wokes being in charge of sports. It's only a matter of time before we get rid of the score, after all. That's what the wokes do. Ultimately, you can't have a score. And everybody sees where this stuff is headed. There's no real pleasure. There's no real escape. And people want to escape. They want to escape having to deal with the virus. They want to escape the death. They want to escape all these things. And there's no way to do it. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to hide. The wokes are all encompassing. And by the way, that leads to a level of cultural backlash as well. It's a real problem. There is a problem that Gen Z, the youngest of TV watchers, who are now some of them in college and just getting out of college, they're less into sports than ever before. Well, of course they're less into sports than ever before. When they played sports, you had to wrap them in bubble wrap and couldn't give them a score. They got burnt out on the wokes, the pre-wokes, putting mattresses around them so that they couldn't get injured on the field. Of course they're tired of it. Sports is going to have to fundamentally recalibrate itself, and they're going to have to do it for a lot of reasons. They're going to have to do it because sometimes the games take too long. We've got limited attention span now in this country. That's just a reality. They're going to have to revamp because of attention span. They're going to have to revamp because they keep making the rules more convoluted. They keep dumbing down the game to a degree, and the dumbing down the game actually loses people. It's kind of like at a church. You know, the churches that are the fastest in decline in the country are the ones that clearly don't believe the Bible that they claim to be preaching from. When the sports are played and overseen by a bunch of people who clearly don't believe in the sport, it kind of is reflected in the viewership leaving. Why should anyone watch a sport when the players, the coaches, the bureaucracy of the game don't particularly care for it anyway? But also, people have gone to sports for escape. They can't go to the stadiums. They're not allowed. They turn on TV and it's just another reminder with the fake crowd sounds and the empty stadiums and the lectures on COVID and the appearances by bureaucrats to lecture them and tell them what they're doing to kill everybody, that there's just no escape from it. People wanted to escape. So streaming services, the number of streaming services skyrocketed. Number of people watching HBO Max and Netflix and Disney Plus and Apple TV Plus and all the other pluses on the planet on the streaming service has gone up. Netflix viewership is up, I think, 53% during the pandemic. And they're watching all the old stuff. They're not watching the new woke stuff. They're watching all the old stuff where people dare to be offended. And they're not watching sports because they want a break from the virus. And they're not getting it in sports these days. Even if the athletes aren't, the media hypes, oh, he's taking a knee, hero, he's taking a knee. And then the commercials go talk about how you're a terrible person. You should be putting on your mask and socially distancing for the rest of your life. Nobody wants to listen to that.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick Erickson.
Hi there, it's Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of the program, 877-973-7425. This hour of the program has been brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan in Noonan. If you are in charge of a business and the finance decisions of the business and you need capital, lines of credit, extra cash, $100,000 and above, reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan. FirstLibertyGA.com is their website. FirstLibertyGA.com. Donors gave a House candidate more than $8 million. A single firm took nearly half of it. From Megan Flynn and Michael Shearer. U.S. House candidate Kim Klacik walked onto Mike Huckabee's cable talk show last August as the latest conservative celebrity, riding high on a viral campaign ad that had attracted 10 million views and was shared on social media by Donald Trump and his eldest son. We raised close to $2 million, the Republican congressional hopeful said of the 3-minute spot, which showed her marching in a red dress and high heels past abandoned buildings in Baltimore, asserting that Democrats do not care about black lives. But later that night, Klacik's staff told her it would be best to stop disclosing how much money the ad had raised for her campaign against Kwesi Mfume, Democrat, because she wouldn't be keeping much of it, Klacik recounted in an interview. The company that produced the video, Arsenal Media Group, would take a cut, and a firm hired to promote the video, Olympic Media, would keep up to 70% of the money it generated, some of which was not disclosed in Klacik's initial campaign finance filings. Klacik, a self-described college dropout who launched a nonprofit organization to help disadvantaged women before running for office, said she did not personally approve or know about the contract with Olympic Media until the conversation. When I saw it, I almost passed out, she said. Her campaign is an example of how some consulting firms are profiting handsomely from Republican candidates who have robust appeal in today's politically charged environment, even when they're running in deep blue districts where it is virtually impossible for them to win. The more viral the candidate goes, the more money the companies make, a model possible only through the online outrage machine of hyperpartisan politics. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not just Republicans. How many Democrats wasted money on Amy McGrath in Kentucky running against Mitch McConnell? Or Valerie Jarrett and her campaign commercials, or what was the Sandra Fluck when she ran using the statements Rush Limbaugh had made as a way to advance, or the guy who was the partner or spouse of the guy who owns the New Republic, or the guy over in South Carolina against Lindsey Graham, and all the polls showed it really close when it wasn't, and anyone who actually knew anything knew it wasn't that close. The Democrats do this too. Both sides do it. This is a real problem. I can't tell you the number of times I get hate mail from Republicans because I don't highlight particular candidates. And oftentimes here in Georgia, it's the candidates themselves who get mad at me. Like, for example, there was a candidate who ran for office, a Republican candidate who ran in John Lewis's district. And I did not have that candidate on my evening radio program in Atlanta, and people close to the candidate were furious with me, and I got hate mail from them for ignoring a competent, qualified Republican candidate. But there was a problem. Why did I want to put that candidate on my radio program? Because if I put him on my radio program, it's perceived as an endorsement, whether it is or it's not, and people are going to send that person money. Why send that person money when they have no shot of winning? You know, the Democrats are coming to terms with this too. There's a Democrat now running against Marjorie Taylor Greene who's put out a viral ad, and the Democrats are already pouring money into this person's account. If you put a dog turd between two pieces of bread and it had an R next to its name, it would beat that Democratic candidate in the 14th Congressional District in Georgia. That's just the reality. That district is drawn, so a Democrat will not win ever. And the same is true in the 5th Congressional District, John Lewis's district. It was drawn so that a Republican can never win ever. Kwasi Mfume is a popular Democrat in Maryland. His district is drawn, I think it's 70 or 80% Democrat. There was never, ever a shot for Clackett to win. And yet a ton of people sent her money. Same with, I'll tell you, the other, I got hate mail on this program because I did not highlight the person running against Ilhan Omar, the Republican running against Ilhan Omar, in a district that was drawn for a Democrat, no matter how bad the Democrat was going to win, or the Republican against AOC. There were Republicans in both of them, and I got hate mail from people for not having them on my program when I knew they were never, ever, ever going to win. And it's not one of those, oh, but if you have them on and we promote them and give them 100% name ID, they're going to win. No, you give them 100% name ID, every Democrat in the district will know who they are and go out and force to vote against them. Because the districts are drawn that way. Or the Laura Loomer idiot in Florida. That idiot is running again. She's nothing but a huckster and a grifter. She's running for office again. People will give her money to take on a Democrat. And then there's that Pam idiot woman down in Florida, the Democrat, who always runs and claims she's some sort of candidate. And she's a whacked out, wackadoo Democrat, but they give her money because she's a whacked out, wackadoo Democrat who says the things that they want, but she'll never win. And every dollar you give to one of these candidates is a dollar you could give to a winning candidate, and you don't. And the hucksters, the grifters, the con men, and the outside consulting agencies make a killing.
30.
That's the problem, is the consultants buy a new beach house. The consultants can buy beach houses for their beach houses with the money you're giving these candidates who have no shot in winning.
15.
There's got to be a level of discernment in politics, and it seems like everybody's lost it in their rush to own the other side as opposed to actually win. Well, everybody, kiss Texas goodbye. They're all going to die in Texas. They don't have to wear masks there. Left-wing meltdown of this is nuts. Welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number, if you would like to be a part of this here program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can also follow me on social media, E.W. Erickson. You can go to ewerickson.com. You can get the podcast. You can see what I'm reading. You can find all my recipes. I guess I got to send one out today. I forgot to set it up. I'll get out a recipe. You can see all of that at ewerickson.com. And you can listen to the live stream if you're out of town. Did y'all know I checked the other day the amount of people who listen to the live stream just on our website, as opposed to, we got all sorts of affiliates and people listen on those live streams as well. But like half the people who listen to my live stream don't even live in the state of Georgia, which is excellent. So hi, all of you in Ohio who listen, because good gracious, a lot of people in Ohio listen. Now, we must get into this Texas news. To begin with the Texas news that they will no longer be requiring masks, I want to start with James Lindsay. He is a math PhD. He is the founder of New Discourses. He calls himself apolitical, and he was very unhappy when Georgia reopened. James Lindsay actually put up a thread when Georgia reopened and was pretty critical of Brian Kemp for reopening the state of Georgia. And he wrote at the time, gotta say, 19,400 cases, 800 deaths, and 18,600 active cases makes opening back up on the 24th and 27th of April seem like a very cavalier plan, Georgia, he said. And at the same time, you had The Atlantic claiming that Brian Kemp was doing an experiment in human sacrifice. I want to read you this thread by James Lindsay. This here is a story about how data, not ideology or partisanship, changed my mind about COVID policy. Last April, Georgia was a state planning against advice to open back up ahead of many others. I made fun of this vigorously, believing the COVID hype. Mea culpa. I was a smug S-word about it too. In fact, at the time, he replied to Laura Ingraham and said, the correct responses would be to praise the responsibility of Georgia's citizens who aren't stupid enough to listen to the advice of those like Laura Ingraham and myself who were saying, go on out. James Lindsay tweets, I was ready to see the Georgia disaster in real time. So I started tracking a statistic about COVID cases and deaths across the nation and in a handful of states, including Georgia. I got made fun of for doing this, by the way. My data weren't showing me what I expected and probably kind of hoped for the vindication, not the harm, to be true, though. Georgia wasn't having any catastrophe. I was trying to rationalize this by late May when he tweeted, I'll gladly admit I have given up on the tracking project until the end of April when states I thought rather cavalier, Georgia, and their decisions started opening back up. I wanted to see if anything had happened. Answer, way less than I expected. I couldn't actually deny what the data were telling me. I always get annoyed when people treat data as plural, even though it is. Catastrophes were not in the making, as had been predicted, because of loosening lockdown measures. The fact of the matter was that Georgia wasn't doing worse than Tennessee, for example, which had somewhat stricter requirements, and neither were doing worse than states that did have stricter ones, sometimes much stricter, like California. I was wrong about COVID policy, and the data I was collecting so I could show everyone how right I was didn't bear out what I wanted to have to be the case. I reluctantly had to admit it, and that's where the real skepticism of the unquestionable authority of COVIDia began for me. I remember also making fun of the hypothesis early on in the COVID era that lockdowns would increase time together in closed quarters and thus virus rates. I don't know if it's still true, but it's a very plausible explanation for California's horrific performance. So yes, Texas and Mississippi going 100% open and mask mandate free are in fact test cases. We should watch them and we should be open-minded about what might happen in either direction. My opinion is that they're making the right call scientifically and legally and ethically. The essence of science is when the data doesn't bear out your hypothesis or theory, your hypothesis, theory, model, or whatever is wrong. There's no arguing with this, and it is sort of humility that's worth remembering. Best to watch Texas and Mississippi in this mindset. Postscript. The lockdowns and other mandates are, in fact, unconstitutional overreaches of power and devastating in their own ways, so there are other reasons to support Texas and Mississippi here that have nothing to do with public health. As I've maintained for months, aside from the constitutionality question, the pandemic policy we've been applying is psychopathic in the extreme, and any policy that doesn't balance lives, life lived, and livelihoods is a catastrophe in the making. Good for him for recognizing that things change. The data has changed. Well, the left is pouncing. Here's the left-wing mayor of Austin, Texas, who flew out of state and then from a private plane headed to Mexico announced that people in Texas needed to stay home and not party. And for those of you who say, but Ted Cruz, Ted Cruz took his family out of state. I don't think there was a problem with him doing it unless there is a leadership argument there. Some friends of mine have raised, but he wasn't calling on people to shelter in place. The mayor of Austin, Texas was telling people they can't go into gatherings and they got to shelter in place. And he flew off to the beach on a private plane to do exactly the opposite of what he made people in Austin do. But here he is now upset with the governor of Texas.
You know, it's not based on the science and data, so it's based on something else. And it could be the criticism here associated with the power going out. It could be the criticism he's getting from the really far right people in the state who have been complaining about masking from the very beginning. But it's not the science and the data. We know that when we did this in Texas, cities stepped out first, the state came along later. The numbers started going down. Every time we have opened up the economy too soon, we've started to see a surge again, and that's the concern. And especially here, you know, if you're under 65 and an essential worker, you're about to be put into the position where you don't qualify for the vaccine, you can't protect yourself, and now you're going to be this frontline worker around people potentially that don't wear masks. I can only hope that our community recognizes we still have a choice. Regardless of what the governor did, we can still choose in our city to act like we do have a mask mandate, for people to continue to wear it, for businesses to continue to require it, and that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah, that's right. Who cares what the government says? Keep wearing your masks. Who should we rely on? The CDC says now is not the time to let down our guard. And, you know, in fairness, there is some data out there that suggests the virus declined and is on the rise again. But new cases are down 19% nationwide. Hospitalizations are down 29%. Deaths are down 9%. The data shows downward trends across the nation, except in a few places. The country is averaging, this is from the New York Times, updated March 1st. The country is averaging about 68,000 cases a day, a figure that has held mostly steady for about a week. Though the pace of progress seems to have slowed, there's not yet been any real rebound in case numbers. Fewer than 50,000 coronavirus patients are hospitalized nationwide, according to the COVID Tracking Project, down from 130,000 in January. Though deaths have also declined, about 2,000 deaths continue to be reported across the country each day. In some places, health departments have said many of the newly reported deaths occurred weeks ago. New York and New Jersey have added cases at the highest rates in the country over the last week. Cases are persistently high around New York City. What? Kansas, Nebraska, and Missouri are among several Midwestern states that have seen case numbers plunge to their lowest level since the summer of 2020. Where are new cases higher and staying high? Georgia is on that list, but only as it relates to a bunch of other states who are now below Georgia. Most states, the virus is either low and staying low or high but going down. The only state where cases are low but going up is Michigan. we're headed in the right direction. Vaccine rates are starting to ramp up. There does appear to be a plateau, but now you can visibly begin to see more of a downward trend again in the cases. And so Texas governor said, all right, open up. Now, part of this, let's be honest and clear about what's happening here, is Greg Abbott the governor of Texas, alienated a ton of people with his handling of the energy situation, with the snowstorm in Texas. The governor of Texas forced people to do the mask, shut down businesses. A lot of Republicans in Texas didn't like it. And essentially, one of the reasons that Governor Abbott is opening up right now in Texas is because of damage control. He's got to rebuild support among the Republican base in Texas that didn't like the lockdowns. Texas, for perspective, has more cases and more deaths right now than when Greg Abbott locked the state down and ordered a mask mandate. That being said, I think he's doing right now. I would just be cautious in effusive praise of the governor of Texas, because the reason he's doing it has more to do with damage control, I think. I mean, the people in Texas are livid over what happened with energy, with the power outages. They're livid with government policy in Texas. They're livid with his handling of it. They're livid with the Republicans in Texas not accepting blame or responsibility or trying to fix it. Friends of mine who are Republicans in Texas are actually upset with me for saying Ted Cruz should have was fine to go to the beach. That tells me there's a problem with the Republican base in Texas, with Republicans from Greg Abbott on down. And most of my conservative friends in Texas are the ones most antagonistic towards the governor right now. On top of the energy issues, the lockdowns, the mask mandate, all of that, they believe it's an incursion into their freedom, that he has restrained their liberty, and by God, they're Texans. So I would not be too effusive in my praise with the governor where some of this is damage control. Now, interestingly enough, look at Mississippi, though. Tate Reeves, the governor there, is doing the same thing. Tate Reeves was one of the most forceful Republican governors in the country on why you got to wear masks and debunking the conspiracy theories that masks don't work. He's actually been very, very forceful on the issue. He's been very data-driven in Mississippi. The governor of Mississippi has been one of the most data-driven governors in the country. And in fact, if you look at the data in Mississippi, Mississippi cases are high, but they've been going down pretty dramatically. A 29% decrease in Mississippi over the last 2 weeks, 8% decrease in deaths, and a 24% decrease in hospitalizations. In fact, on March 2nd, there were 457 people total in hospitals in Mississippi with COVID-19. 43 people died. Only 301 new cases reported. Mississippi is trending rapidly in the right direction. It's doing way better than most states. And so the governor there, based on it, it's doing better than Texas, by the way. If you want a per capita comparison, Mississippi is outperforming Texas. And so the governor in Mississippi said, it's time to go back to your life. Now, of course, the ninnies are, we can't do this. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. No, anti-science. What we're learning about the left these days is that anything they don't like, they declare anti-science. When science is your God, that's what, it's like a lot of Christians. When Democrats announce policy, they're like, well, this is contrary to the Bible. There's no difference between Christians saying that and Democrats say, well, it's anti-science. It doesn't matter what the science actually says. If they don't like it, it is immediately presumed anti-science. It's what they do. When science has become your God, science is a terrible God. Science actually changes. And most of the people who claim to worship science or be pro-science, they're not actually pro-science. I mean, these are people who actually believe you can pick your gender, but they claim to be pro-science. The science suggests that the lockdowns really haven't worked. Look at California. Look at New York. Look at these other places. The science says wash your hands. That's been fairly universal, and the science has actually said masks do work. But at this point, people are tired of it, and you're rapidly reaching the point where there's just a breakdown in respect for law and process. And the cases are going down enough in the country, and the vaccine rates are going up enough. It's time to move forward as a society. it's time to open back up. It's time to go back to our lives. I think Texas and Mississippi, give them a chance. Maybe they're wrong, but I would note to you that all the voices screaming loudly about Texas and Mississippi were the voices screaming loudly about Georgia last year, and they were wrong about Georgia. They just might be wrong, but they don't have the humility to acknowledge it.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now at 877.
Hello there. I hope you're having a lovely, y'all. It's Wednesday. We got 2 more days, and I'm actually off on Friday. And a confession. Let me just unburden myself with my audience for a moment. Y'all know I'm a middle-aged, fat, very white guy who spends most of my life indoors behind a desk. And a buddy of mine is convinced that I got to learn to fly fish, get out of the house, do something meditative, away from where the cell phones reach you. So I've decided on Friday, he's taken me and another friend fly fishing for the very first time, going up to North Georgia. We'll be somewhere on the Chattahoochee near Helen. And then he's got a place that he says nobody knows about, and we may sneak over there some too. Just going to practice, and he's an expert. I know people have strong opinions. I'm already learning. people have very strong opinions on the best rivers to fly fish, the best places to go, and he's got strong opinions as well. He's an expert. I'm trusting him. Save your opinions for later. But look, I'm not an outdoor person, and I'm already in the stress of it. What do I do? What do I wear? How do I layer? Am I going to need sunscreen? How much sunscreen? Am I going to have to get up early? Do I have to stay up all day? Are the bugs going to come for me? The bugs. I hate the bugs. How much off am I going to have to put on myself? All of that sort of stuff. At least it'll be cool. Shouldn't have to worry about the bugs. It's rather intimidating. When I was a kid, I loved camping when I was a kid. I grew up in Dubai. My dad and we would camp on our roof. We had a flat roof, typical of houses in the Middle East. And so we would camp on the roof. And then when I was older, we would go out into the desert. And it's the coolest thing. So you can go, back in the day. Now, Dubai is nothing like it was when I was a kid. We didn't have all the big buildings and stuff then. I mean, you could go out into the desert, and between Dubai and Jebel Ali at the time was vast nothingness of desert. And you could park your tent, and the most amazing thing is it'd be 90 degrees, and at night 40. The temperature would just plunge. That's the crazy thing about the desert. But you could see the Milky Way. You could see the stars. I like to take my kids. For example, we went to Sedona, Arizona. A couple of years ago, I guess 2 years ago now. I gotta win the lottery so I can afford to do it upright and take the family back. I had a TV contract at the time. We went out. We stayed for a week in Sedona. We went to the Grand Canyon, and I took the kids out at night. You can see stars that you can't see anywhere else. I went up to North Georgia, actually north of Blue Ridge a while back, and was staying right on, the Toccoa? I stayed at a cabin. This was a couple years ago during the lunar, or during the solar eclipse. And at night, you could visibly see the Milky Way with your eyes. You didn't have to have a telescope or a camera. And that's the one thing I love about being outside. I used to love to camp when I was a kid. Do a bonfire, cook on the flame. I love to cook on an open fire. And now I've gotten old, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be at the Ritz, be in a comfy bed, do that. And it's funny how you change as you get old. Well, I'm going to try to be an outdoorsman a little bit. I may get tangled up in the line. I may say, one of the guys who's going with me, this is my really big concern. If I'm really honest about my greatest concern about fly fishing, it's that I'm going to be with the preacher. And when things start to go not right for me, well, part of my sanctification is working on my language. Let's just put it to you that way. Poor old preacher may hear words he hadn't heard in a long time. I'm going to work on it. Say a prayer. That's all to say. I'm not going to be here on Friday because I'm going to learn to fly fish.
30.
If I have time, I'm going to go through Clarksville, and I'm going to go up to Clayton, and I'm going to go get a brisket taco at U-Joint in Clayton because I've been craving them. Somebody sent me a restaurant the other day in Clarksville that I got to try. So I'll do that. And I got to go to Unicoi Outfitters as well, which I'll be making a pit stop there at some point. I'm excited to head back up to that area of the state, though. Gorgeous, gorgeous area. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Jackson from Athens, listening on WGAU, writes me and says, I keep talking about Northeast Georgia and going fly fishing, and when am I coming to Athens? You know what? I get the second round of the vaccine on Saturday, and thereafter I intend to, I mean, you still got to be reasonable and take some precautions. But so, like, for example, I really thought today in Macon, there's a great barbecue restaurant downtown called Satterfields. I mentioned it yesterday. I know they're struggling a little bit, and I thought I was going to say, you know what? I'm going to Satterfields for lunch, and I'll see y'all there. Now, I didn't realize I had a conflict on my calendar. I can't do that. Y'all should go to Satterfields. But I think I'm going to do that at some point and just say, hey, tell it down the radio to Dan, the program director up in Athens, and say I'm going to swing by and say hi, and then I'm going to have a beer somewhere in Athens. And if y'all want to show up, you can show up. I'm going to do that at some point. And I'm just going to get in my car and I'm going to drive up there. I may have to do my evening show up there, and then go out and have a beer in Athens somewhere, and then drive back to Macon, I guess. Stay the night and do the show at WGAU. I don't know, but I want to start doing that. Do it in Rome. Go down, get myself a room at Sea Island. Totally tax deductible. It's a total business expense. And do that and just hang out with listeners. I miss doing that. The security team at my office gets so upset with me for doing stuff like that. And maybe one day I won't be able to, and maybe that day really is now and I'm just naive, but I still feel like I should be able to say, I'm going to be at this location at this time. Come say hi. And we will get back to that at some point. Now, I want to go to the phone. Steve in Gainesville. I got to go up to Gainesville, too, because I got people who want me to come up there. Steve, how are you?
Hanging in there. Hope you're doing okay. You know, before I get to my point, you talk about going fly fishing, and that is one of the treasured parts of our rights here in the U.S. of A., and that is the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. So I am so glad to hear that you're going to do that, and I think we need to all try to mix that in with all the nonsense and garbage and bad stuff happening.
I know you didn't call into this, but can I tell you my greatest fear, worry, and concern about fly fishing, in all honesty, I'm obsessed with this, is I tried on the waders and all, and what happens if I'm in the middle of the river, I've got waders on, and suddenly I need to pee? What do I do? This is a concern that I have.
Well, I guess you can just pretend you're a kid and you're in the swimming pool.
I guess so.
But may I repay all of your wonderful recipes with a campfire recipe?
Yes, please do.
If you're going to have a campfire, please consider going to the outdoor store and getting one of those little foldable. It's either round or square, but it's like a toasted sandwich maker thing.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And you can put, the bread is like the old Pepperidge Farm or Arnold original white bread. Mm-hmm. You butter it really good on both sides so it doesn't stick to the cooker. And inside, you can make a calzone.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Don't put too much stuff in there because it fills up and then it doesn't work so well. And the other thing for dessert, you can make a cherry pie. Just get some cherry pie going. It's amazing.
Okay, I'll try the first, but I'm anti-fruit. My wife would love the cherry pie, though.
Okay.
All right.
Well, next time you. So the point. Am I still on?
Yep, you are.
All right. Thank you for the extra time, sir. First of all, I heard somebody rag on one of your colleagues, and not rag on him, but say, you guys need to step up your game. No, we, the listeners, need to step up our game because you're doing the good work right now by doing what you do every day, by encouraging us and keeping us informed and throwing in a little humor from time to time. So I wanted to thank you for that. And I don't want you to say, gee, what else can I do? You just keep doing what you're doing, Eric. And it's up to us, especially in the church, which I find really lacking. Mm-hmm. If it comes a time, Eric, that the churches need to give up their tax-exempt status to do the Lord's work to save this country, then that's what needs to happen. But as for me, I've been involved. I try to do a little bit every day as far as getting in touch with my legislators, both state and national, federal, and give them a piece of my mind. I try to do it in a respectful way, and then I've even gone and figured out where the state, one local place where they can get plexiglass barriers so that we can do the monitoring up close and personal of all of those mail-in and absentee ballots. It's real simple. You know, you wear your mask, you wear your gloves, you slide the documents under the slot in the middle of the plexiglass barrier, or you hold them up so the other people on the other side can match signatures or IDs or whatever. That's all. We all need to be doing a little of that. If they can't do it every day, at least a couple times a week, do something, people.
Yeah, let me interrupt you there. I appreciate so much what you're saying, because oftentimes I do get from people, oh, you need to be doing more, you need to say more. I can only do so much. I got 3 hours in a day to connect with people, 5 right now with my evening show. And if there's anything that I try to be consistent about, it's telling people, get involved in your local Republican Party, show up and learn to be a poll worker. For example, I know 5 different people who called this program convinced that the election was stolen, and they went and signed up to be poll workers, and they got trained on the process in the run-up to the runoff in areas of the state that needed extra poll workers for the runoff, and their minds were changed on the process, one, but two, because they're involved and they're conservative, they feel like they're doing something to help not just the process as a whole, but to protect against vote fraud. And I can sit here and scream and preach all day, but it doesn't do any good if people don't actually get up and get involved.
Amen, brother.
So look, I appreciate you calling, and if I get a campfire, I will make me calzone. Thanks very much for that. Y'all, Steve is a great jumping off point for something I wasn't going to get into, but I will. I genuinely believe one of the you know what? Let's sit up here and be serious for a moment with you. When I pay attention to much of the media right now, a lot of the mainstream media is obsessed with Fox News still, rooting for its decline, comparing its ratings. It's actually rebounding. Newsmax is on the rise. That gives CNN and MSNBC concern. They complain and they complain and they complain. Let me tell you what my complaint is. It's that a lot of conservatives are spending so much time online with other conservatives, or watching television, or dare I say even just listening to talk radio all day, that they're not really having an impact. Now, I don't want to lose my listeners. That would not be good for me. But at some point, you do have to just unplug and plug into reality. You got to turn off the TV and go turn on life somewhere and be a meaningful part of your community. You're worried about what George Soros is doing in education? Run for your local school board. Show up at a PTA meeting if you got kids in public school. Or homeschool your kids, or put them in a private school to get them out of that system. Show up at your city council meeting. Show up at your county commission meeting. Find out what's going on. Like these 5 different listeners I had who were convinced the election was stolen in November. They went and they trained. They served as poll workers, not watchers, but workers for January's runoff, because the counties they lived in were short-staffed. They had put out an all-call, and they found out that, hey, the process that people were telling me was how the race was being stolen. Turns out it wasn't that. It was something else. And they realized the race wasn't being stolen, but now they're actually there as conservatives, as Trump supporters, who are participating in the process in a way to ensure voter integrity. It mattered. Your involvement in your community matters. If you're just yelling at me on radio or giving me an amen, or you're watching Fox News, you're watching Tucker Carlson at night to find out what's going on, and you're not going on in your community, you're part of the problem. Now, a lot of us are at a life. I am right now. I've got one kid in soccer. I've got another kid into art. They're both in school, one in elementary school, one in just got into high school. We're busy as a family. We're busy with family activities. And we can't be involved in our community a lot. But there are a lot of you who are beyond that season of life now. Either your kids are in high school, self-sufficient, not in sports, or they're in college, or You're an empty nester now. Be engaged in your community. Be engaged in your church first. Be engaged in your church. But be engaged in your community. Be a poll worker, or go volunteer for your Republican Party and be a poll watcher. Or if you're a Democrat listening, for the Democratic Party, go be a poll watcher for your party. I don't care what party you're in. I care that you're involved in the process. It is really easy for people to complain. It is really easy for people to yell. It is really easy for people to vent, but they just can't get their butt off the couch and go do something. They can't be involved. Find a local charity and be involved with that charity. Be involved with a homeless shelter. Be involved with a food bank. Be involved with a soup kitchen. Find a local charity and get involved. Make a difference in your local community. You know, your local community needs you way more than Washington, D.C. needs you. You're not going to have a massive impact on Washington, D.C. right now, especially. But you can have a massive impact in your local community. You're worried about George Soros's money coming into local communities and moving things to the left. Well, get involved and move them to the right. His money can't compete against your sweat equity because you're on the ground local. So many people just want to abdicate their role. They want to get online and build a community of like-minded people where they never have to encounter a person who disagrees with them. They want to vent, they want to complain, they want to email me and yell at me because I said something they don't like and they're offended by it. Well, God bless you for listening, even though I make you mad. But also engage. Engage. And you know what? Go out. Have a beer with friends. Go to a local restaurant. Support a local restaurant. I can't go to Satterfield's downtown and Macon today, but those of you, if you're listening on WMAC, go down there, support a local restaurant that needs customers right now, that's in need. Go to your favorite local restaurant that's in need. Go to the Bears Den. Y'all, the Bears Den. Oh my gosh. It's one of my favorite places in Macon. I like to eat. You notice I always reference the restaurants because I like to eat. But you get my point. Don't stay home in front of your TV or your radio. Be involved in your community. Get out. Enjoy life. Steve said we got the freedom for the pursuit of happiness. Go fly fishing. Just don't come where I am. I don't want y'all to see me embarrass myself. But I'm just tired of the conservative movement at this point being a grievance session. I'm so tired of the anger in the conservative movement where they've decided they're victims. I thought the conservative movement was a group of people who chose not to be victims, who despite all the circumstances, despite culture and the media being out to get them, they were not victims, they were winners. They didn't win all the time, but they fought like hell to win, and they get back in the game and they fight some more. And it just seems like the conservative movement at this point, if they can't make money off of it, they give it up. It's one of my frustrations with the digital movements is on the, I as someone who helped get Red State off the ground, got the Resurgent off the ground, I've been involved in conservatism and the conservative movement. Some people derisively now call it Conservatism Inc. or some such. I've been involved in all of this stuff. And the great frustration I have between the left and the right is on the right, you go to the donor class and they want to know what their return on investment is financially. What money are they going to make on this? What profit are they going to make? You go to the left and their return on investment is, how are we going to advance our cause? George Soros has never sat down and asked, how am I going to make a profit on your shenanigans? He wants to know, how many votes are we going to change? How many progressives are we going to get elected? How many policies are we going to advance? Constantly in the bulk of the Republican donor class, it's how much money am I going to make on this? Am I going to be an investor? Is this going to take off the ground? Is this going to launch? Is this going to make me more money? You don't hear that on the Democratic side. And conservatives at this point are like, well, we just can't compete. Well, you can't compete in one because I think the donor class is broken. And part of it is the donor class has gotten shaken down by so many con artists for so long that they have a hard time investing money in causes when they're going to get swindled. But also, conservatives right now, they just want to complain a lot. Stop complaining. Stop complaining. You know, the world is not out to get you unless you let the world be out to get you. And the wokes are poisoning the well for themselves. More and more Americans are being turned off. Republicans control most state legislatures now and governor's mansions. They're going to be able to redistrict in their favor. Going to be able to take back the House of Representatives in the reign of Nancy Pelosi once and for all. This is it for her. We got great opportunities on the horizon. November was a setback. It was a setback. But there's hope there. And so many people are focused on the setback, they're not looking at the hope. They're refighting the last fight. They're not moving forward. And optimism and happy warriors win. The grievance set, the victimhood, hey, join us. Culture's out to get us. The media's out to get us. The left is out to get us. They're censoring us and canceling us. We're the side you should be with. That's not really the winning message. We got great messages out there if we just choose to use them. And we should. We live in the greatest country on the planet. Start acting like it.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. By the way, the Babylon Bee, Texas reopening. The Babylon Bee has this great story. Headline, Texas removes mask mandate to scare all the Californians away. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas has just lifted the mask mandate and is allowing business to return to 100% capacity. The governor explains that in these trying times, extreme measures must be taken to stop the spread of Californians into Texas and to scare them off from ever wanting to return. The last thing we need is a bunch of sissies from California moving to our beautiful state of Texas and screwing everything up and turning the state blue, said Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, at the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce. Too many Californians have entered our state. Too many ridiculous liberal ideas have already been proposed. This must end. It's time to open Texas 100%. Governor Abbott continued, quote, "We believe that by removing the mask mandate that all of the Californians will flee in terror, restoring our state to its former glory. As soon as they see the joy and hear the laughter of our citizens returning to normal life, they'll be sure to pack up and leave us at once." The governor has strategically placed no mask required stickers on all Texas state signs, warning all who enter of what lies beyond. He's expressed hope that this will send any namby-pamby who reads it back around to where they came from. The Babylon Bee, no, it's not real. But Hollywood is melting down, by the way, at this. Hollywood actors, Bradley Whitford, the tweets, the GOP is a death cult, replying to Greg Abbott. Chelsea Handler, retweeting People Magazine's announcement of Texas, says, Only another white man could figure out a way to become a worse person than Ted Cruz. Roseanne Arquette says Putin sure has a cozy relationship with President Lopez Obrador of Mexico. It's all so close to maskless Texas. I have no idea. Michael McKean says Governor Abbott is actively canceling Texans. Adam Goldberg says don't mess with Texas. They'll blankety blanket up for themselves. I don't even know some of these actors, but it's amazing the groupthink in Hollywood these days. No real thoughtful people, nothing, not allowed. By the way, did you know babies are racist now? Babies are racist. Christopher Rufo on Twitter notes that the Arizona Department of Education has created an equity toolkit claiming that babies show the first signs of racism at 3 months old and that white children, quote, remain strongly biased in favor of whiteness by age 5. The Department of Education recommends a reading that claims babies are not colorblind and that parents must instill anti-racist attitudes and actions beginning at birth in order for their children to not absorb bias from the world around them. Another recommended reading claims that all white people are white in the context of a society that continues to disadvantage people of color based on race. The document teaches schools how to, quote, change what it means to be white and inculcate, quote, an anti-racist white identity. The department provides additional resources for families and community telling white parents that they can have a black friend, partner, or child and still be racist. The article claims that white people deny their own racism to alleviate some of their white fragility. Oh, boy. My goodness. The department also provides resources for families and communities telling white parents, that they can have a black friend. And this is just bizarre. The Board of Education in Arizona, a state controlled by Republicans, no less, is doing this. It's nonsensical. The department also shares a series of resources for teachers about systemic racism and intersectionality that explains how to conduct an equity audit and implement racist equity plans in schools using the principles of anti-racism. It is moral garbage. It's also anti-scientific. There's no science to support it. And this is nonsense upon nonsense. And yet they're advancing this sort of stuff. I gotta tell you, we may have to get Christopher Rufo on the show to talk about critical race theory, because he really is diving deep into this. And man, we gotta have some more conversations on it. Maybe when we come back, but also we gotta laugh about Neera Tanden disappearing. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson. The phone number you want to call in, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. So glad to have you with me today. It is Wednesday and I see blue skies outside my window from my studio. I don't know what it's like where y'all live, but it's nice, even though the weather has gotten cold again. All right. I need to talk for a moment about poor old Neera Tanden. Ding dong. The witch is gone. I realize it's her nomination is. She's not. She's around. But wow, are they spitting mad on the left? And, you know, the irony here, for those of you who don't know who Neera Tanden is, she ran or runs Center for American Progress, which is a lefty think tank, but she was way more Clintonite than anything. She has sabotaged progressives who dared get in Hillary Clinton's way. You will notice Bernie Sanders never actually announced how he was going to vote. He does not like Neera Tanden. But then the more middle-of-the-road Democrats like Manchin and Kristen Sinema didn't like her either. Lisa Murkowski hinted maybe she would vote, but really she wasn't going to. So Tanden is gone, will not be the nominee. And this is something worth pointing out. The Republicans United were able to scuttle a prominent progressive from being in the Biden administration. If they can just get one Democrat to side with them, they can have more success than Chuck Schumer. Rachel Maddow on MSNBC.
Now, before tonight, we were still waiting after days and days and days and days to see if a Republican senator would decide that he or she would support Neera Tanden to run the Office of Management and Budget in the White House. The reason the White House needed to look for a Republican to support Ms. Tanden is because conservative Democrat Joe Manchin of West Virginia announced that he wouldn't vote for her, which immediately, it was evident as soon as he said that would potentially scupper her nomination. He said that he would not support her nomination because he decided that he did not like the combative tone of some of Neera Tanden's past tweets. And the reason this is sticking in everyone's craw, the reason this that announcement that he wouldn't support Tanden has become sort of a stain on Senator Manchin's reputation, is not that senators don't have a choice as to which way they're going to vote on every nominee. It's the question of the standard that he's applying here. Because, of course, Senator Manchin voted to confirm plenty Trump nominees, all men, of course, who had much worse problems with their online tone than Neera Tanden ever got anywhere near. The reason this is a real problem for Senator Manchin and his reputation is because, for some reason, Senator Manchin was only bothered by her tone in her online statements. He was not similarly bothered by the much more inflammatory things said by Republican male nominees who he happily voted for in the past.
Yeah. Sorry, the sexism guard. Oh, he wasn't bothered by the men. He was just bothered by the woman and her tone. On Neera Tanden, I'm willing to bet you that Joe Manchin didn't really care about Neera Tanden's tweets. He cared about the body of her work at Center for American Progress. And there's no reason for him to have to bring that up and get into it and have the nitpick comments. He can just say it's her tweets. And he doesn't have to support or deal with Neera Tanden, a deeply unpleasant person. Now, you can say, wherever you are in the nation, I really don't care about the story. And that's fair game. No one should have to care about Neera Tanden. And guess what? Now we don't have to. Because she's not going to be the nominee. The point here, though, is the amount of hysteria on the left over her nomination being rejected. And many of these progressives have never particularly cared for her, but they're outraged that she wouldn't get the nomination. I'll tell you what I'm told privately among Democrats and Republicans is that other Democrats would have opposed her as well because there was a real concern that she would politicize OMB in ways even the Trump administration did not do. It looked very much like she was trying to bring the Center for American Progress in-house to the Office of Management and Budget. Now, for perspective, Russ Vought, who became OMB head for Donald Trump, who's now left to start a think tank, a pro-Trump think tank, a dear friend of mine, and had been for years the political director of Heritage Action for America, the Heritage Foundation's 501c4 that regularly, ruthlessly, and successfully battled Republicans, pulling them to the right. Russ was nominated to be the deputy OMB head when Mick Mulvaney was the head of OMB. And then when Mulvaney left to become chief of staff, Russ was named head of OMB. Russ Vought was not put in as the head of OMB, but a deputy. But more so, everyone on Capitol Hill, given his pedigree, he had worked on Capitol Hill, had worked for Mike Pence, had run the Republican Study Committee for a number of years before leaving to the Heritage Foundation. Yes, he was a partisan. Yes, he played politics, but he played politics mostly against Republicans, and it was the Republicans and Bernie Sanders who tried to obstruct his nomination before ultimately giving him a pass. In the same way with Neera Tanden, but there was one thing you couldn't argue about with Russ Vought. Russ Vought ultimately was a budget hawk, and Russ Vought cared deeply about the budget. Neera Tanden has never been a person who seemed to care about the budget. She cared about progressive politics, and she was already putting people in OMB who didn't need confirmation, unlike Russ Vought, who were partisan progressive activists. Again, people whose jobs weren't the budget, who didn't care about the budget, who weren't fiscal hawks. They just learned how to run political operations to go after their own side and others. That was why Democrats and Republicans alike were concerned about Neera Tanden. They didn't want an internal 501c4 coming after them from the White House through OMB, and that was their fear, and she did nothing to dissuade them from that. It's a big inside the Beltway story, but it's got political ramifications around the country that the Biden administration out of the gate thought she would be an appropriate person. She was never a good fit for the office. All these think pieces on why on earth would Joe Biden do that? Why on earth would Joe Biden pick her? What went wrong with the nomination? The nomination was screwed up from the beginning by merely nominating her. It had nothing to do with her tweets and nothing to do with her being a woman. It had everything to do with her career. Interestingly enough, it was the president's chief of staff, Ron Klain, who advocated for her, and people within the White House are now throwing him under the bus with her, though he will have a job, and she'll have to go back to Center for American Progress, I guess. But it's not just that. One of the other things that the Democrats are advancing right now on Capitol Hill is a wealth tax. Elizabeth Warren is in favor of a wealth tax. Elizabeth Warren wants to raise taxes on the super wealthy in this country, essentially allowing them to be driven from the country willfully, let them move, pack up and move, take their wealth with them, not create jobs in this country. Here's Grover Norquist.
The left in 1965 believed that they could cure poverty. That's what the $15 trillion spent with the Great Society was. They were going to help poor people. After 50 years of failure to actually be able to move the needle, they've now decided not to try and say that they can help poor people because the government's not been able to do that. And the failure is too obvious. So now they want to fix inequality. That's easy to do. You just tear down higher income people. You don't have to help a single person in the country in order to have less inequality. Recessions are a great way to create less inequality as people's stocks fall. And this, what she's saying is, won't it be great that she talked about producing that money. She's going to
bringing in revenue, yeah.
She's taking it. She's not producing it. She didn't produce it. She's confused about her role in this. She's the one who takes things from somebody and then gives them to others.
Is really...
Yeah. She's taking money from people and isn't brave enough to admit it. Here's Joe Kernan on CNBC.
The people that you're talking about, you're saying they don't pay taxes. They accrued this wealth, whether they were lucky, whether they inherited it, whether they're skilled, whatever it was. They did do it under the normal tax regimen that we have right now. So they have paid taxes on the way, right? So this is
If you look at someone like Mark Zuckerberg or anyone on the billionaire list you showed,
Most of those folks have paid less than 2% of their income over time in tax.
No, I know, but under current law, they haven't broken the law. This isn't punitive, right? This is just looking at how much. Okay, so this is how much wealth that they've accrued. You're deciding, and this is the first time we do it in other areas, but call it what it is. It's confiscatory. But why, if you're going to do 50 million and decide that those people have enough, when you get up to $1 billion or 10 billion or 20 billion, why not really do something serious? Why go from 1.5 to 2.5? Go 10, go 20. If 50 million is an area where those people already have more than they deserve and more than they can use, then a person who has 10 billion, you really let's raise some real money. Go for 50%. Why not? Why not? You've decided the other people have enough and you're taking, so why not do it? Raise some real money.
Because that's not my view of the economy. That's not the American people's view of the economy. Government and civilization cost money. Ever since the Bush administration's tax cuts for the very, very wealthy and the Trump administration's tax cuts for the very wealthy, we're running deficits.
I'm trying to help. Why not? I know, but did you hear my question was why not make it much higher on people that have $1 billion? Why? I'm not arguing with you. Let's do it. Why not do it?
But not fiscatory taxation. So do the American people. Right now, we don't have progressive taxation at the very top.
Notice, so that guy, his name is David Gamage. He is an advisor to Elizabeth Warren on this idea. And notice he's not answering Joe Kernan's question of why not make the wealth tax progressive? When you get to $1 billion, take even more. Why aren't you doing that? Well, here's Grover Norquist was in on that conversation. Here's a little more of him.
Sure, if you want to, you reduce the capital gains tax. Every time we've reduced the capital gains tax rate, higher income people have paid more in taxes, and you've had more growth, and there have been more jobs for everybody. So if you're into hate and envy, go ahead and do the wealth tax. There's a lot of selective discussion about where the wealth tax has succeeded. 15 countries have put in a wealth tax. 11 got rid of them because they discovered how dysfunctional it was.
It's a good point. 15 put it in and 11 got rid of it because what was happening was the wealthy see themselves now as a global elite, not an American elite. And they're perfectly happy to pack up and move to New Zealand. They've got a private jet to ferry them away and never come back. They don't need the United States, really. Here's what's going on here. If there's one thing I want you to take away from the discussion of the wealth tax, other than the fact that it's probably not going to be implemented, it's this. What Elizabeth Warren and the left are trying to do with the wealth tax is to make people feel good about taxing other people. The wealth tax is popular with most Americans because they know they'll never pay it. But the reality is that it doesn't fix the underlying problems of wealth accumulation in ways that are unfair to everyone else. And Elizabeth Warren has no interest in fixing those problems because she wants everyone dependent on the government. If you fix the problems that allow the massive accumulation of wealth by a select few in this country and turn them into an oligarchy, what happens is you have more people who can compete. And we don't want to fix the problem because we might have more wealthy people in this country. Elizabeth Warren at least doesn't want to fix it. So instead, she'll take from those who have and give to those who have not and create greater dependence on government. This is all about the government and Elizabeth Warren and the business elite in this country deciding that they know what's best for you, and God help you if you dare think you can compete against them because you're a hick and a rube. The wealth tax is favored by socialist nations and ultimately doesn't work, and they have to get rid of it. Grover Norquist points out that of the 15 nations in the West that had adopted it, 11 have already abandoned it because the rich just packed up and moved so they wouldn't have to pay. But everyone distracts from the underlying issue. A wealth tax makes people feel good that the wealthy are getting their comeuppance and ignores the fact that they're not fixing the underlying conditions by which the wealthy in this country can generate massive accumulation of wealth, and you can't. The wealthy in this country have rigged the tax code through lobbyists, lawyers in Congress, and campaign donations to benefit them. They have rigged the regulatory code and the tax structure to make it harder for others to compete. Why do you think Amazon favors a $15 an hour minimum wage? Because it's going to hurt the small mom and pop shop on Main Street and put them out of business, and you're going to have to go use Amazon. Why do you think Walmart favors government health care plans? Because Walmart no longer has to give its employees health care and free up resources while the mom and pop shop can't necessarily compete. So many of the major corporations in this country and the billionaires behind them favor policies that look good on paper but are actually designed to make it more impossible for you to ever compete against them. The wealthiest people in this country and the Democrats in Congress they give money to are the least likely to support the free market, because the free market means they could be disrupted and there could be creative destruction in the marketplace. The wealthy financiers of Wall Street, the wealthy tech billionaires, they're socially progressive, but also fiscally progressive in the sense that they do not want a free market. They don't want someone coming in and daring to create the next Apple. They don't want someone coming in with a good idea. They want to sue you for stealing their patents. They want to sue you for stealing their business model. They want to destroy you with lawyers, lobbyists, and regulation. They want to impose a sales tax on you if you take off online. All of these things are designed to keep the little guy little. And they package all of these policies like a wealth tax in the veneer of justice for the little guy. We're going to take down the big guy. No, the big guy really doesn't care. If he doesn't like it, he can pack up on his private jet and move. You're stuck. But they never, ever, ever want you to have the opportunity to compete. That's the bottom line of progressivism these days, is they want everyone dependent on the government. They don't want anyone to dare get off the social safety net. If you do, you will be canceled by Woke Haram.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there and welcome. I am pleased to have Omaha Steaks as a sponsor and advertiser for this program. I'm a longtime customer. I really am a longtime customer. 25 years maybe. I've been getting and giving Omaha Steaks as gifts. I order it for myself. One of the things I've been doing lately is trying to do meal prep, as I've been better about going to the gym and the amount of protein my trainer tells me I need to eat today. Good gracious. Basically, all I can eat is steak and chicken every day. And it works, though. I'm already seeing the effects of it. And Omaha Steaks has these pre-sliced frozen chicken breasts. You can thaw them out. When I start the show before 9, I go in, take them out by 12, leave it on the counter. It's ready to go into a stir fry. It's good to go. They have so much. And right now, you get their Butcher's Best Sellers, and you get butcher cut fillets, you get kielbasa sausages, you get caramel apple oils, you get all sorts of great stuff. And if you order right now, you'll get 4 free chicken breasts and 4 of their great burgers. I've got one of those Blackstone griddles, and I love to use the Omaha Steak burgers to do smash burgers on the griddle. Fantastic stuff. What you do is you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia. You put Georgia in the search bar. And if you put Georgia in the search bar, you will see the Butcher's Best Sellers. If you order right now, again, you get 4 free chicken breasts and 4 free burgers. But you got to use the code Georgia to do it. Now, this is important for me as well. We're starting this relationship on this program with Omaha Steaks. It's a great way, actually, for you to support this radio program growing, is to take advantage of this great deal. You're not going to go wrong with the quality. They age their steaks at least 21 days. They've got brilliant flavor. They are a wonderful company. So go to omahasteaks.com right now. Put Georgia, 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 like the state, in the search bar. Lord help me if I misspelled that. And take advantage of this great deal. But they have so much more than the Butcher's Best Seller. Take a look at Omaha Steaks' website, by the way. They get, I interviewed their CEO. Their supply chain for getting fresh fish rapidly from New Zealand is incredible and distributed around the country. They've got seafood. They got pork. They got poultry. I ordered a brisket and smoked it on my Rectech. Just omahasteaks.com. Put Georgia in the search bar. All right. When we come back, I have got to get in a little more. Very briefly, there is some news on the Dr. Seuss front where they're saying they're not canceling when they are. Actually, the news is nothing to do with Dr. Seuss. You know, the left that wanted to cancel Dr. Seuss, they've come up with a list on the National Education Association website of alternatives to Dr. Seuss. Wait until you hear. And then also, the vaccines, they're running into a woke problem. That's right. The vaccines are not woke enough, and Woko Haram is starting to rattle their sabers against vaccinations. Hello there, it's Erick Erickson here. Y'all, I will leave his name out of it, but you know who you are because you're listening right now. And someone just sent me a recipe to cook on the open flame as I am out fly fishing. I thought it had to be my dad. I don't think it is. And the reason I thought it had to be my dad is because the recipe includes Spam. You know who you are. I'm not going to shame you on radio because I love my audience, but somebody sending me a recipe with Spam. My dad, when I was a kid, we lived in Dubai, and he would get Spam, and it's because they ate it as kids, and it just smelled gross. And it was like he also ate canned asparagus. I wouldn't eat asparagus until I was in college because I smelled his asparagus growing up and thought, that just smells disgusting. Why would anyone eat that stuff? And I love asparagus, fresh ones, thrown on the grill. I just, Spam. I'm not gonna get. So I'm just, y'all, I love you, but I don't want to eat Spam. I had to grow up with that. It's like I won't eat bananas. You know, I'm not a fruit guy. This is so random. None of you will care, but I care, and so I'm going to say this. Charlie, for the record, I stopped myself from telling people to get their own show. My producer doesn't like it when I say that. When I was a kid, my grandfather was old when I was a kid. He had a horse fall on him. If I remember right, a hurricane was coming and he was trying to move cattle, and it had started raining, and the horse slipped down a hill and rolled over on him, crushed his leg. They never thought he'd walk again, but he did. But he shuffled, and he did not really have a lot of teeth. And my grandfather every day would eat cornflakes, but he would let them get soggy before he ate them. And he would eat Campbell's vegetable soup. And he would eat bananas, and he'd start on a banana and then leave it, and it would get gross, and then he'd come back to it. But my sisters and I, to this day, I don't like fruit. I'll eat apples. I don't like fruit. I like vegetables. I don't like fruit. And I realize most people like fruit. It's sweet. I don't. But I would eat bananas. But after years as a kid watching my grandfather smack the I'm sorry. I can't eat bananas. In fact, when my wife makes banana pudding, she's got a great the Paula Deen banana pudding recipe. We haven't canceled it in our house, but it uses chessman cookies and uses cream cheese. Oh, it's fantastic. But she always makes a portion without bananas because I just can't eat bananas. And it has nothing to do with the taste. It is totally a texture thing after years of watching my granddad smack on bananas. I am a picky eater. Everybody thinks I'm a foodie, and I'm not. There are foods that I like, and I like them done, but I hate going to these gourmet restaurants. A buddy of mine took me to a place in Macon. I'm not going to name the restaurant. That would be impolite. It was very nicely done, but the food was half the stuff on the menu I couldn't even pronounce. And I'm not into like super fancy gourmet frou-frou food. If I want a brisket taco, I want a brisket taco. I don't want the brisket taco with the fancy cheeses and the pickled radish and just give me a brisket taco. Give me a hamburger without your weird fancy stinky cheeses in it. I'm not into the food trends. I just want good food. All right. Now we have to get to Dr. Seuss very briefly, just very briefly again. Read Across America was yesterday to correspond to Dr. Seuss's birthday. The National Education Association in the past has used the Cat in the Hat as their mascot for Read Across America. They coincided the event on Dr. Seuss's birthday for co-branding. But in 2017, Melania Trump sent a stack of Dr. Seuss books to a school library and was denounced by the wokes as sending racist material because Dr. Seuss had written some problematic books. Well, those 6 books, as I mentioned yesterday, they're being canceled. The Seuss Foundation will no longer publish 6 books that had racist overtones. I think I'd only heard of one about the zoo. The others, I never even heard of them. Now it's amazing to see people rush out to buy these books on Amazon. One of them sells for $900 now. If I saw it on Mulberry Street or whatever. But there are new books being recommended by the wokes. And you can read these new books instead of Dr. Seuss. The National Education Association no longer carries, or promotes Dr. Seuss's books. Here are the books that the National Education Association this year has said you can read, that they're appropriate in place of Dr. Seuss. Us in Progress, short stories about young Latinos. Short stories drawn from true accounts offer moving portraits of the hardships and victories of the diverse Latinos who live in the United States. A Land of Permanent Goodbyes. After a horrific bombing, Tariq must travel with his father and one surviving younger sister, Susan, from war-torn Syria to Turkey to Greece. Children of Blood and Bone. While ruthlessly pursued by Prince Enan, Zayli, her older brother Zayn, and rogue Princess Amari fight to restore magic to the land and activate a new generation of magi. Ura Shah in the End of Times. Launched into the world of Hindu gods, Aru faces the sleeper demon from the Lamb of Barada in her Spider-Man pajamas. Can I Touch Your Hair? Irene and Charles end up as partners for a poem writing project, and the poems they write focus on family, friends, food, and what they learn about race and the world around them. The Prince and the Dressmaker. By day, Prince Sebastian is heir to the throne. By night, he's a fashionable Lady Crystalia, made all the more fabulous by Francis, his secret dressmaker. Brazen, rebel ladies who rocked the world. Meet 29 feisty females, some world famous, some little known, in this collective comic biography. Julian is a mermaid. After seeing 3 women spectacularly dressed up as mermaids, Julian makes his own mermaid costume from abuela's curtain and potted fern. What will she think of the mess, and of Julian the mermaid? They Say Blue. Follow a young girl through a year or a day as she explores and examines the world around her and shares her questions and imaginative thoughts. Hashtag Not Your Princess. Voices of Native American women. The experience of being a Native American woman is vividly illustrated in poems, essays, interviews, photographs, and art. Americanized rebel without a green card. Understand the hurdles Sarah and her family faced to rebuild their lives after fleeing Iran, and the anxiety that being an undocumented immigrant added to her awkward teenage years. These, my friends, are the books that have replaced Dr. Seuss. A veritable collection of wokeism in hardback and paperback, available to indoctrinate your children on social justice. In fact, one of the books explicitly is all about learning to love social justice and how to get involved and be an activist. It's just this dreadful stuff. And it's how they want to indoctrinate your kids. Now, speaking of wokeism, the vaccines are running into woke problems. Any of the authorized vaccines are much better than no vaccine, especially, this is from Axios, especially for people at high risk of severe coronavirus infection, but their differences may fuel perceptions of inequity and raise legitimate questions about the best way to use each one. All 3 vaccines authorized for use in the U.S. from Moderna, Pfizer, and BioNTech, and Johnson & Johnson register a very high efficacy in treating hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19. The efficacy against severe disease is greater than 85%, and there have been no hospitalizations or deaths in major countries, even in countries that have the variants. Got that? No hospitalizations or deaths from any of these vaccines in any of multiple countries that have the variants, said Dr. Anthony Fauci. He says, be careful when you try to parse this percent versus that percent. That's Dr. Fauci. And yet the media is doing it. And the most obvious issue is Johnson & Johnson. So Johnson & Johnson is 85% effective. Out of 100 people who get it, 85% will have full immunity. But what if the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is given in minority communities? The media says this might be racist. Jay Inslee, the woke governor of Washington, says the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is going to be a challenge for all of us. Why? Because of a perception of two-tiered vaccines. If the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is heavily used in communities of color, which have already borne the brunt of the pandemic, trust could be further eroded. Helen Gale, the president and chief executive of the Chicago Community Trust, told the Washington Post, quote, if we end up with an hierarchy that says all rich white people get Pfizer and all poor black people get Johnson & Johnson, that'd be a problem. The whole thing is awkward. Everything is treading on eggshells. Everyone is treading on eggshells because we want to get the right message across, says John Moore, a professor of microbiology and immunology. The nuances are very hard because we don't have concrete answers to every question. In an ideal world, it would make sense to give the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to younger people because they would potentially lower the risk of resistant variants emerging. The problem is we don't really have the luxury of time of doing all the clinical trials you'd like to see done. Trying to convince people that vaccines are all equal isn't going to be work. People are making claims that go beyond the solid data we have, and that's a risky proposition. We're going to see the differences in rates of adverse events, for example, pretty quickly for ourselves once we know lots of people have gotten vaccinated, especially when the fear of major outbreaks subsides prematurely, and we're trying to get young people to accept vaccination. Adverse reactions are going to matter to people. Here's the thing that no one really wants to address in the media. Of course, they don't want to address this. Let me just give you the headline from the Washington Post. Johnson & Johnson vaccine deepens concerns over racial and geographic inequity. Subtitle, decisions to send it to harder to reach communities make practical sense, but could drive perceptions of a two-tiered system. Essentially claiming that if we're giving a vaccine that is 85% effective on one dose to minority communities in hard to reach areas, that they're going to be screams of racism. Isn't that where the media is supposed to come in? Isn't that where the media is supposed to do its job? I mean, how do you fuel the perception that it's racism without the media there to fuel the perception? I mean, the media has spent how much time pushing back on the stolen election stuff? Why won't the media push back on the racism perception? Why can't the media stand up to the wokes and say, no, these areas are harder to reach. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is one dose, far more easily transportable, easier to get to those communities. That's why we're using it. It's amazing to me the media thinks that the perception is a problem not for them or caused by them when it's both. In North Dakota, which has achieved one of the fastest rates of inoculation, Governor Doug Burgum says the new product, Johnson & Johnson, intensifies concerns not just about vaccine hesitancy, but the potential for brand hesitancy as well. The problem's been on display in Germany, where some residents are shunning shots developed by AstraZeneca in favor of the Pfizer-BioNTech because of the different levels of protection reported in clinical trials. The challenge in the United States is especially acute in the context of racial and economic disparities exacerbated by the pandemic, according to state and local officials. If a vaccine thought to be less effective, though still well above the threshold of 50% set forth last summer, it is used overwhelmingly in communities of color, it could erode trust. Question. I have a question for my audience. Whose fault is it if trust is eroded? Is it the 85% vaccine that is 100% effective in keeping people out of hospitals or dying? Or is it the fault of the media that has been rushing to put forth a bunch of information that has seeded false claims and false hope in the heads of people listening to the media? Who's responsible? Is it the pharmaceutical that developed a life-saving drug that has a 100% effective rate of keeping people out of hospitals, but only an 85% effective rate of keeping people from getting the virus? Or is it the media who wants you to know that that's what the clinical trial said, not the real-world data? And by the way, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine appears to be more effective against the various viral mutations than Pfizer and Moderna. Whose responsibility is it? The fact that the media doesn't want to answer the question, the fact that the media doesn't want to engage in who is ceding ground with the false claims and who is raising the specter of racism. When the media went through that much effort to push back against all the false claims about the election, to now have this is nuts. At some point, is anyone going to acknowledge the media is somewhat responsible for all of the claims that are inappropriate and misguided and misunderstood about the efficacy of the vaccines? Shouldn't the media take some responsibility? Well, they never will, and that's the point. They're perfectly happy to push back on conservatives. They're they're very happy running conspiracies about CPAC and its stage. But the media stirs the racial pot when it comes to the vaccine. And now they're like, our bad. We don't know where people got this misperception from.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show.
A buddy of mine, Joe, just texted me, I do not like green eggs and spam. I do not like them, Woko Haram. I'm not a spam eater. But thank you very much for sending me the recipe. That was very thoughtful. I wrote a piece, and I want y'all to read it, please. We don't have time to review. I will spend a little bit of time. A lot of people are talking about critical theory now. Critical theory is a funny thing. No matter how much you can study it, no matter how much you understand it, like the Marxism from which it's derived, and it really is, if you don't embrace critical theory, critical theorists will tell you you don't really understand it. Critical theory is an idea. It's derived from Marxist philosophy in a postmodern society. Now, in a postmodern society, to understand postmodernity, And it took me a long time studying this to understand what do people mean when they mean postmodernity. In modernity, in modern times, people believe that there is objectivity, there's objective knowledge, that there's absolute truth, and that you can find that truth. Postmodernity favors something called deconstruction, where you can break down the truths to raise questions about them. And in so doing, you realize that everything is subjective, there is no objectivity, and there is no absolute truth. This is problematic within churches because Jesus said he's the way, the truth, and the life. And if there is no absolute truth, there is no Jesus. And so you can derive anything you want from Christianity, and a lot of people deconstruct their faith and fall out of the faith because they nitpick certain things that don't make sense to them, for which there may be rational explanations, but now they don't believe the people or the sources, because in postmodernity, falsehood trumps truth. Well, critical theory attempts to explain the world in a postmodern setting where there is no absolute truth and there is no objectivity, and it explains the world in terms of power dynamics. Its proponents believe that those with the least power have the most moral authority to speak. Those with the most power can't speak with any moral authority. Power is mapped through intersectionality, so race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, a few other things are taken into account. So the white, male, heterosexual Christian has the most power, therefore the least moral authority to speak in society. Critical theorists believe theory, or reality rather, is constructed by language. You can change the language in order to change reality. Power is exerted through language, including the power to shape reality through what is called a dominant discourse. The way to reshape reality is to reshape language. The way to change the dominant discourse is to change the language and the conversation. So critical theorists are opposed to free speech. They're opposed to free enterprise. They're opposed to academic freedom. The freedom of the privileged to engage in dominant discourses has to be reduced so that we can hear the non-privileged and the oppressed and they can rise. Now, some critical theorists would take issue with the description, but that's part of the problem. The proponents of critical theory are really hard to pin down on exactly what they're talking about, because they believe that by virtue of me being a white, male, cisgendered, heterosexual guy, I can't really talk with any authority. It's very much for them like a capitalist describing Marxism. They don't think it's valid. I've written about this and how it's impacting churches, and I hope you might text the word data to 33777 and get the link and read what I've written about it. Critical theory is really infesting churches at this point, and it's tearing up congregations. And it is a postmodern theory inherently incompatible with Christianity, and yet a lot of pastors and theologians are embracing it, and I want to explain to you why it's wrong and bad.
15.
And so please text data to 33777. Share it within your church community if you would, please.